So first, let me say, for anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Ryan LaTourette, and I am the Director of Regulatory Affairs for the Great Lakes Drone Company in Michigan. And one of the things that I do constantly is drone cases, especially dealing with preemption, state preemption as the main thing. But yeah, RDQ is one of those things that we are very interested in. Race Day Quads sued the FAA over remote ID, and remote ID is supposed to go live in September of 2023, so next year. But in order to do that, they first have to come up with the protocols as to what's going to be broadcast over remote ID. They haven't done that, right, at all. And that has to be incorporated by the manufacturers in September of this year. So we're only a couple months away, and we still don't have the protocols.
So let me translate for Luke real quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you don't need to. I understand.
Did you? I know you understood the words, but remote ID is it's a thing in the drone world that we're all dreading, and because of it, there's going to have to be an extra little doohickey doodad that we put on our drones supposedly, and in order for them to create the doohickey doodad, they have to wait for the government to put some stuff together to tell them how and what and all of the specifications, and they haven't done that. And so, and I'm fine with it. I'm like, oh, you want to push it back? Yeah, we'll worry about it later. What's that, a rug? We'll just sweep it under the rug. Don't worry about it, right? Is that a good thing? What's happening or no? Right.
Well, yeah, so that's the key, is that here you have Race Day Quads that has sued the FAA and said, wait a second, you're violating our 14th Amendment, you're violating the right to privacy. There's a lot that's in there, right? And it's gone before the court. What we don't have is a decision. And since we don't yet have the protocols from the FAA, you kind of put two and two together. It really starts to add up to say, the FAA is extremely worried about the decision that's about to come through with RDQ versus the FAA. If they lose that case, that changes what they might do for the protocols. If they were to win, they would just send out the protocols. We'd all be good, and the manufacturers would have what they need for the September deadline. So since we're 2 months out, it's probably not going to happen, right?
What is cheaper to do? That's the bottom line, right?
That could be. I think part of it is, if you look at the Race Day Quads arguments, right? Number one, with FPV drones, what they're saying is, why can't I fly in my backyard in whatever it is, Class B airspace in a zero grid? I'm not going to harm any plane coming overhead, and this is my property, especially below the tree line. And you think about that, and they're right. And at the same token, why do I need to have some type of identification of my drone that my neighbor that hates me knows when I'm flying, right, in my own backyard? That's none of his business.
Privacy.
And so those are some of the considerations that the court's going to have to look at and make a determination. How much of the sky does, the FAA really take care of? Can we force somebody to broadcast information that would end up tracking them when they're performing a perfectly legal operation?
So which way do you think it's going to fall? And how long do we have to wait to find out?
That's the good question. I continue to hear, and I can't name a source, but I continue to hear that the FAA is very worried that the decision is not going to go their way. I have a pretty decent feeling that they're right. That there's some of the arguments in there are going to strike down portions of the remote ID. I don't think it gets struck down overall, but time will tell. And as far as when it's going to come through, no idea. That's the challenge when we're talking to court.
Do you think that if it doesn't go the FAA's way, that they'll be kind of spiteful and think of some other sneaky way of getting the same thing done in a different and call it something else? Because they'll just be like, okay, well, that didn't work. How about this?
Well, we've seen this before, right? So John Taylor sued the FAA to say, hey, wait a minute, you put in a registration on our drones and you did so illegally and we need to pull it out. And sure enough, the court found in his favor and tossed aside registration.
Yeah.
Only for Congress to come back after the FAA prodded them and passed it. And now we have registration as a requirement. I think there's a pretty decent chance that they'll come back through and put something in place, probably through Congress, just in the same way.
By the way, if you have any questions for Ryan or any questions for Luke, because Luke knows everything. He's a very smart kid. You can go ahead and just put that in the chit chat. Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening right now. And we could spend all day on just the remote ID stuff. Do you think that we'll ever have shielded operations?
That's a good question. I think so in some way.
Let me, if you would explain to Luke and everyone else who doesn't know what shielded operations is and why it's important.
Well, your idea of shielded operations and mine are probably two different things.
Well, mine's more subjective. Yes.
I think there's a chance that you have shielded operations and things that are not remotely able to be tracked without warrant, right? So you could require a specific warrant to come through, and this goes back to the Katz case in the U.S. Supreme Court that said you can't do any type of tracking unless you have an absolute valid reason to do so and gone before the court. So that would be one type of shielded operation. I think the other is you talk about shielding operations at a low height level to say this is somebody's backyard. You don't need to be able to track them in any way. And that comes from the idea that we are going to see priority given to certain drones. We're already starting to hear that chatter where, a heart transplant donor drone is going to be flying through the sky and be given precedent over other vehicles. I was just down flying in Kentucky last month and flying with hot air balloonists, and the hot air balloonists were talking about how the FAA has designated that drones are going to be given the right of way even over a hot air balloon. And so they're a little upset about that. But, that's some of those operations where they're going to start prioritizing certain drone usage, whether it's a police drone coming through or an ambulance drone, something of that nature, and giving them priority over other aircraft.
Yeah. And Luke, just so you know, I think the shielded operations that people are most familiar with are now. Luke, if you were going to fly a drone next to a building that's 3 stories high, you would think that if you don't go above that building, you're not going to have any problems with any manned aircraft, right? Like you're not going to have 747 swoop down and interfere with that, right?
Yeah, because that would destroy the building too.
Right? Yeah. We haven't even talked about the building. But so don't fly higher than the tallest thing around you, and that's important for FPV people. Somebody in the chat had a question. Ryan, have you heard of the drone superhighway proposal in Europe? If so, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's not even just in Europe. We're seeing it all throughout the states. In fact, here in Michigan, there was just a contract put through with a company to add a drone superhighway down in the Detroit area. And the idea is to give preference or deference to drones and navigate them to a very specific area of the sky and basically push away other aircraft. And that includes other drones that aren't designated for that superhighway. To be honest, I think they're jumping the gun, right? When we're talking about those types of drones, we're not talking about the consumer level, 4 or 5 pound drone. We're probably into the, 100, 200 pound drones that just aren't available yet.
Right.
In those delivery drones that will take from one warehouse to another warehouse versus a retail store to a home.
Yeah. Somebody brought something up, and I get questions like this all the time. I see people talking about it all the time, and it doesn't seem fair. Maybe you have an opinion on it, but paramotors. Paramotors apparently don't need FAA licenses. They can fly into whatever airport. It seems like they have carte blanche compared with drones, and people kind of get bent about it. Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I am of that same opinion. You know, if you look at an ultralight, if you want to go step into an ultralight and fly, go for it. You do not need a pilot's license. As long as that thing is under, I want to say it's under 500 pounds, step in and fly. And now, granted, you are stuck in Class G airspace. So it's a lot like, yeah, you're not going to be within those Lance circles, right? If you're talking about a drone. But it's that concept that if I wanted to take an aerial picture, I could just jump out into an ultralight, go up in the sky, take a picture. I don't need a 107. I don't have to, take a $150 test. I take my picture and sell it, and I'm good to go.
Doesn't seem fair, does it? It doesn't seem fair. You're traversing the same airspace. I think maybe they're just grandfathered in, right? Or something.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is.
So. And the concept too is, if you have a 500-pound paramotor or ultralight in the sky, you think about that. What kind of damage could you do to an aircraft versus a 3-pound drone? And yet they're wagging their finger at the 3-pound drone and saying, well, helicopters can fly at low altitudes too. Well, yeah, same difference for ultralight.
Here's the thing. And you know how the FAA works. They're not going to be like, the paramotors can do that, so we're going to back down on some of the rules with the drones to make it fair. No, they would pile on rules onto the paramotor. And then the paramotor people would be like, you drone guys are ruining our hobby. Because that's the same thing, right? That's the same thing that kind of happened with fixed wing when all these drones started coming out.
One of the things that it's always been mind-boggling to me is, we talk about FAA regulations, and the statement had always been that FAA regulations were written in blood because they came out of a manned aircraft crash that caused injury or death, and that deserved a regulation. And with drones, it was the very first time the FAA said, we're going to be preemptive, we're going to throw on all these regulations. But you didn't have any data points to suggest that they were in any way providing safety. And now we're starting to have to back those out. I mean, we look at drones flying at night. I was flying at night back in 2013, didn't need a Lance request or anything. Well, now, you can't fly at night unless you have this 3-mile strobe. And if you're going to fly in controlled airspace, well, you got to have a Part 107. It's just mind-boggling that you have that. But, we're starting to see the FAA ease those regulations. Same thing with flight over people. I think we'll continue to see some of that. But at the same time, anytime you're talking about a regulation, it takes years. So we're waiting and waiting.
You can't legislate common sense.
Yeah.
And there's no one enforcing all of these things. Even our community here that knows more than the general public about these things is still like, well, if I go here and I can't. And that brings up a great topic here from a guy whose name I'm going to withhold out of politeness, because this person probably broke a couple rules. And I'm talking about the Cape Canaveral. And you're familiar with that. So I'm gonna read part of this. Luke, you still with us? You still good? You catching a lot? Is it interesting? Okay, awesome. Okay, thanks. All right. So this is from Name Withheld. All right. Hey, Ken, I'm reaching out to you as a Part 107 pilot and amateur photographer at Florida's Space Coast. I've been getting negative feedback regarding my footage flying over SpaceX Falcon 9 rockets being brought back into Port Canaveral after they land offshore. People have gone so far as to tag the county sheriff, Port Authority, FAA, and SpaceX on my videos, insinuating that I'm doing something wrong. Port Canaveral property is in fact a no drone zone, and I can't and don't ever fly from their property. The airspace in question is Class D if viewed from a sectional chart. Luke, do you know what a sectional chart is? It's like a map
Like-
map of a sky. It's like the invisible the airspace classes that we're talking about. It's like class G and then C and D and that's like where the big planes fly. That's like
Oh, that makes sense. So like levels of where your drone's flying
That's right.
and altitude.
right. So
That
we
makes
don't
sense,
bump into each other and all that stuff. The local tourist helicopter frequently operates in the same area. Photographers are on board doing the same thing as me, and yet still some of those same individuals that have shot the rockets from the helicopter seem to take issue with my drone capturing the same thing. I'm curious to hear your thoughts and feedback about this. Does the Canaveral Port Authority even have jurisdiction to enact a no drone zone on their property under their current state zoning? This seems like something right up the alley of your friend Ryan LaTourette. Sincerely, name withheld. All right, and so I'm gonna play some of this outlaw video, which I think is probably not legal.
Good video.
It's great.
It looks
It's so great. But Ryan, do you want to explain? Yeah, your thoughts on this, sir?
Well, it's a great thought. You know, he went through the rigmarole of looking at the sectional chart and trying to understand: am I in controlled airspace? Am I going to, need a Lance authorization? Looking at the video, I can see, he's not flying over any people. He's certainly probably within line of sight, it appears. So in all those respects, it looks great. One of the things that is a challenge is that the sectional chart does not always show what all is going on. So there's some other tools that you have to think about when you're making that assessment of whether or not I can fly in that location. Certainly one of those things is to check for a TFR. In this case, there was no TFR. He's good there. But I would always recommend before any flight, doesn't matter where, even if you're in Class G airspace, you want to make sure that you are not in a TFR. If you are, don't fly. The next bit is to look at the FAA ArcGIS. The FAA ArcGIS is a map that shows all the no drone zones that the FAA has established, and it clearly shows special use airspace as well. If I'm looking at this and I tried to get it right down to the point where he was flying, I do see that he's in special use airspace according to the ArcGIS. I've actually pasted the link in the chat under my ID, Ryan JL, and so you can go out to that and see it's all zero grid Lance. So to be able to fly there, you're going to have to go through the FAA drone zone, make a request, a manual request to get that exception for that airspace authorization. Given the letter, I don't think that he did that, and I think that he went off of the idea of whether he looked at a loft or Skyward or what other Lance application and said, I'm good to go. I don't need an authorization.
It sounds to me like he tried to do his due diligence and just got caught up by the dynamics of the whole thing, because this, if you look at this, I mean, this looks like something you shouldn't be flying over, doesn't it? I mean, just your inner common sense is like, maybe I shouldn't be 10 feet off the top of this rocket.
I'd be scared.
Yeah,
to
right.
Go near that.
Yeah, and it's all burnt up and stuff. Like, I don't know, man.
Honestly, I would fly that. Definitely.
I would
it looks
too.
like something that I would do. It's just a matter.
Yeah,
you're right. It's probably a matter of checking a little more closely to make sure. And I think in this case, he's in those zero grids, and that would be a concern.
If it was wide open, all green, no TFRs, no zero, I would take a FPV out there and dive that thing. I would risk it for the biscuit. You know what I mean? But I don't know. It's great footage.
Yeah,
it's great footage. Where does SpaceX launch from? Where are they towing this to? Cape Canaveral, just where they would launch all the rockets?
Yeah, and that's the other piece of his letter was asking the question: does the Port of Cape Canaveral have the ability to make the regulation of a known drone zone? And so that's a completely separate question, right? So we have a government entity or a private entity, we don't know, right? Making a rule to say you cannot launch, land, or operate from our property. Now, in the state of Florida, they have statewide preemption that says a local government cannot create or enforce their own drone ordinance. So if that's the case, right, if that's a government location, then they would not be able to create that enforcement or enforce that enforcement and be able to fly there.
I'm worn out. How are we going? Is there ever going to be a time where it's just one app to like give you a green light or red light, and we don't have to worry about all these little dip-de-doos? Right?
Yeah.
Because it's very subjective. It's very subjective.
I'd probably want to fly drones more if there wasn't so much of this.
See, that's what I mean. Like, there's so many people. I get emails all the time like, nah, the hell with this. There's too many rules. I'm selling my drones. Buy a go-kart.
Luke gets it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
And that's why I'm going around the country advocating that we have a need for each state in the union to pass a statewide preemption law, right? Michigan was one of the first to do so. And it has having that in place to say a local government can't create or enforce their own drone ordinances, then automatically you're going to be able to look at lands and go, I can fly here or I can't fly here. And you'll have that understanding. Granted, I wish the land applications would start to do special use airspace and TFRs and be more up to date with that. That's a large ask, right? But just having statewide preemption across the board, all 50 states, would be fantastic.
You deal with a lot of people directly that are having these issues in municipalities and getting charged with things. Do you find that the government is just wearing them down to try to, because it's going to take a lot of people to set a precedent to where it starts falling like dominoes. You're like, okay, this municipality did this, so we're not going to do it, on and on and on and on. But it takes individuals that get into these situations to take their time, their money to follow through to do this. And not everybody is up to that task.
And I think that's the key. Not everybody's up to the task. So what we do see are folks that, they'll get the ticket for flying near a stadium and they'll go, oh, I guess I was in the wrong. I'll pay that fine and away I go. I won't fly near a stadium again. And then you have somebody else who questions that, like, wait a minute, I thought I could fly at the stadium. And then they'll ask the question, can I, fight this? And that's where I'll come in to say, yeah, you're in the clear, or sorry, you're not in the clear. But it is going to take on a one-to-one basis to try to fight these tickets, and then at the same token, if you fight it in one locality, now you got to turn around and fight it 2 towns over. It becomes a real challenge, and that's why if we have the state law in terms of preemption, we can fight it at one county or one city and then start shopping that around to those other locations that have the ordinance and say, look, we won in court. Do you want to challenge us? Because we're coming after you. And that's what we've done in the state of Michigan very successfully. And we'll have a statewide precedent here this next year.
I get emails from people all the time asking me, all right, so I'm in a wildlife refuge. Can I fly there? I get questions all the time about people. Can you fly over a state park, or is it a national park? Can you fly in a national park at all? And all these little variations of things like, okay, if it's 3:15 at 2 a.m. and there's nobody there and I'm wearing red shoes.
Yeah.
It's...
And I get the calls as well, of same kind of calls there, but I also get the calls from elected officials that say, hey, I'm, looking at putting in an ordinance and disallowing flight in my city. And then I'll ask the question, well, what are you going to do when the FAA comes out and allows beyond line of sight? And these drones can fly for 5 miles. They're going to go right over your city no matter what. And it's going to be a legal flight. Doesn't matter what regulations you put in place. Do you want that to happen, or would you rather have them standing inside their city where they can keep an eye on it and be more safe with it? Oh, yeah, and maybe spend some money at the local McDonald's or what have you. Now you're talking an economic gain.
Right.
And
yeah, people don't think about that.
Then they back away, right?
Yeah, they don't think about the economic stuff. Like, oh, my town, people want to come here to fly drones? You mean like tourism? Tourism?
Yeah.
We can make money with tourism? Yeah. But, and then here's something else just to chew on, okay? Because eventually, I think they're gonna lighten up on that BV loss stuff, the beyond visual line of sight.
Yep.
And if they do that before cellular drone technology is perfected, then we got trouble, right? Because, oh yeah, you can fly a drone wherever you want. Then they're like, I got my new cellular drone. I'm going to fly to North Carolina. Right? I mean, battery technology notwithstanding, they're going to be able to go far. And I think,
that's one of the interesting things I had. I was at a company, DXC, that had a drone lab down in Australia, and I became a special advisor to that lab. They had already started to take Alexa from Amazon, and you would be able to talk to Alexa to fly your drone, 200 miles away or 400 miles away. And it was quite insane, right? That it used what's called What Three Words. What Three Words is a technology where you map out grids of the entire Earth, and each little grid is defined by 3 words. So I could say, hey, Alexa, fly X drone to, and then say 3 words, and it would launch the drone and fly the drone to that location.
Right. I think they use that sort of grid stuff for mail in like Afghanistan and places that don't have street addresses. I think they use that same thing, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Luke, you still with us, Luke? He's still here?
I'm still here. I'm actually pretty interested in the whole grid thing.
Oh, yeah. Luke loves it.
Pretty awesome. It's like, it just knows the location, so it doesn't need to do anything else. It's just like, all right, I'm going to this location. I know it, so it's just going to zoom on over there.
Right. You don't need an address or GPS coordinates. It just knows it. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Luke's a grid guy from way back. Hey, Luke, your mom just super chat $10. Hey, thanks.
Really?
Thanks, Julie.
Thank
My
you,
sister
Mom.
supports the channel, and she's a member. Thank you, Julie. That's awesome. I think that money's probably your allowance. So I'll give that back to you. So now before we let you go, and we could talk all day about this stuff, and you're very knowledgeable, and I hope you'll come back again soon. But I think didn't we need to touch on East Rutherford, New Jersey?
We do.
Very, very briefly. Tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, so we were talking about flying near a stadium. Can you do it? Can you not do it? East Rutherford, New Jersey, is the home of the MetLife Stadium. I believe the Giants play there. New York Giants in New Jersey. Go figure, right? And East Rutherford put in a drone ordinance that said you cannot launch, land, or operate from our property. You cannot fly under 400 feet over our stadium. And they were expecting that would hold. So this individual had gone through, had flown from the property and was getting his shots. Security approached, said, hey, you can't do this. And he was ready to pack things up when they had called police, and police were there to issue a ticket. So he has been cited. I have written up a motion to dismiss for him that cites the New Jersey state law that says you cannot have a drone ordinance, a local drone ordinance. Everything rolls up to the state, which basically takes all the wind out of East Rutherford's sails in terms of their ordinance. And part of that motion to dismiss also looks at that idea of fly over under 400 feet, right? So not only were they preempted locally, at the state level by their local ordinance saying you can't launch or land from that property, but that it was also that you were preempted by the federal level where the FAA has sole jurisdiction over the airspace. That goes to court here, I want to say next week. And so we're about 6 days away at this point from him having that court hearing, and I suspect we'll have a dismissal and go from there.
And that'll be some good precedent.
Yes and no. It will get rid of the ticket. It's certainly something that we'll then be able to use to shop around, and obviously we'll go to East Rutherford and say, here's proof that your ordinance is invalid. You want to take it off the books, or we're going to do this all over again. It's a way to scare those localities, knowing that hey, if you want to keep this on the books, inevitably we're going to come through and sue you with an injunction to try to take it off the books, and we're going to win. So you can either spend piles of money on a lawyer or little or no money to just take it off the books. And most places are smart enough to say, we aren't going to take a chance in the court, especially seeing how a case has already come through.
It's always about the money, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, man.
They're just like flinging themselves around, being like, yeah, you want to take it off the books, or do you want to pay a huge amount of money? Like, yeah, well, what you going to do, huh? What you going to do?
Yeah.
Kind of,
yeah.
It's not nice.
It's going to come down to fisticuffs.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and the other piece is if they leave it on the books, what do? They go out and they ticket somebody else, and that somebody else doesn't know that it's perfectly legal, and they go, oh, I got to pay the fine, right? And so it's a numbers game. Can I ticket 5 other people at $200 a ticket? I'm just made $1,000, right?
It's almost like speed cameras in Tennessee. You don't have to pay them, but people do because it looks official. I've got like 5 or 6 speed camera pictures of my cars on my fridge just for fun. And I never pay them. And guess what? Nothing happens. But,
Luke, never speed.
Don't speed. No, don't speed. don't do it.
I know.
Luke's a good boy.
I know.
All right. Awesome. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for dropping all that knowledge on us. Appreciate
Thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Good
man.
to meet
Thank
you, Luke.
you. I think I learned 1 or 2 things.
All right.